Welcome back, everyone, to Stay in Your Lane. I'm your host today, John Mahle, and brought to you by Triple T Transport, as always. Today, Class Act, one of my favorite economists. I've got two. I know, Bob, it's you, and it's Dan North, and you guys both look at different things economically, but I do very much appreciate you. And how many years now have you been, geez, the title? Cross-border operations, chief economist. I mean, it's
I have a
just
long title. I will
it's a
give you that.
lot. It's a
It's
lot.
it's a lot. I can't even keep it straight. But yeah, I do. I wear a few hats here. Let's not talk about how long, the 27 plus years I've been at ATA. That just makes me feel old. But you know what? I love this industry. It's a great industry. The entire supply chain. It's fascinating. It never gets boring. And so yeah, I'm still plugging away at it because I like it and I like the my members and the participants in the industry.
Absolutely. I think there's a lot of really great people in the industry. Let me be the first one to wish you Happy New Year.
Same to you.
Yep,
That
Happy
is,
New
yeah,
Year.
looking forward to it.
So, we had an election last November. We've had all types of, I would say, negotiating and posturing and everything go on. We've made it through the holidays. What are you watching? What's keeping you up at night, Bob?
Well, I don't know if there's so through the fall, I was getting slightly more optimistic. Certainly not, woo, right? But like we hit bottom, we were starting to come up. If you look at things like the economy, yes, the macro economy is slowing down, although it's been very resilient. I mean, no doubt about it. Is it slowing down? It is, but we're getting some back to normalization with consumers. More. We went from a boom in goods to a bust in goods, and then coming back to normal, right? Not a boom in goods, just back to normal in consumer behavior. Housing is getting a little bit better, although, mortgage rates started creeping back up again, but that was getting a little bit better. And even factory output, has been in the doldrums. Not horrible, but, not giving, and even that is looking a little bit better. And the Fed. So, that is going into this year, I was getting a little bit more optimistic. But there are some things that we need to, consider as we enter the new administration, right? Some of them are very good, and some we really have to watch because we don't know what exactly is going to happen. For example, we're going to get, with President Trump, we're going to get at least the renewal of the tax cuts that went into effect in his first term, right? So that's a good thing that those won't go away, and that'll help at least in the short term. We could talk about long term in terms of the debt and so forth, but let's put that aside. In the short term, that's a good thing. Plus, maybe they're going to lower some taxes on some other stuff. So, but at a minimum, you're going to get the renewal of those tax cuts at some point this year. The other thing is, not everybody accounts for this, but the pace of new regulations is going to slow, right?
Right.
So that actually frees up a lot of businesses, not just in transportation, but in general. They're like, okay, we don't have to worry about that so much. So that frees us up to make some CapEx spending and so forth. So we're going to put both of those things in the good column.
Okay.
But there are some other things, though, that could have some negative impacts from this new administration coming in on transportation and on the freight economy, right? So one of those things, first and foremost, is what is going to happen with tariffs, right?
Mm-hmm.
We hear 25% tariffs on Mexico and Canada. I mean, that would be difficult, right? It could just be a starting negotiating point, So we have to wait and see. Another 10% on China. So we have to, those are things that we have to see because then you could have some of these countries say, well, now we're going to counter you and put tariffs on goods from the U.S. And just to give you an example of a couple things that my team's been looking at in this regard, believe it or not, we export more agricultural goods to China than we do to Mexico, or about the same as we do to Mexico and Canada combined. So if all of a sudden China is like, hey, we're going to put some retaliatory stuff on here, and all that, that could be a problem. Another area that we're looking at pretty closely is, Elon Musk and so forth have talked about we've got to cut $2 trillion in government spending.
Yep.
Okay, sounds great, right? Sounds like, okay, what? But if you look at sort of where we spend our money, there are a lot of parts of the federal budget that you just can't touch. Entitlements are 35% of the federal budget,
Right. If
right?
anybody touches those, they're out of office
Exactly. Net
immediately.
interest on our debt is 14%,
Right.
right? Then military is another 12%, and President Trump has said, in fact, he wants to raise how much, we're doing. So that leaves you with less than 40%
To get two
um,
trillion.
to get your 2 trillion. And if you then say you cut, and that 2 trillion is about 30% of that 39% that is possible. But here's the problem. If you actually cut at current spending levels, GDP is going up about 2.5%. If you do a $2 trillion cut, you could get over a 4% reduction in GDP. That's a recession.
Right.
So I think, some of this stuff, I think once they get going, they're probably not going to do full bore. Also, mass deportations. There's estimates that 25% of the people in the construction industry are undocumented. You get rid of even a portion of those, that makes construction a lot. So I'm not saying all this is going to happen. What I'm saying is we're going to watch it,
Right.
right? And see, because there's some positives for sure, but there's also things that we need to watch and be careful of.
No, makes sense. When you talk about that, it's how many of those are being being subsidized by the government now, right? So that's potentially a savings. Nobody knows these numbers. We're all going to wait to see how these scales balance out, right?
Yeah, well, that's what, what's the net net, right?
Right.
So if
Yeah.
you have positives here, negatives here, what's the net net?
Where are we going to end
So,
up?
and again, I think even on the tariff stuff, they're going to have to back off a bit because it will increase inflation. And that's not, and higher inflation is one of the reasons that got him reelected. So I do think that maybe they'll start off a little strong, but then back off. Maybe they won't start off, and we'll have to wait and see.
I think it's a negotiation tactic myself. I see it as a strong negotiating place to start from, you know. But
Yeah, I do,
where are we going to end up?
yeah, that's the thing. I mean, I suspect we are getting some new tariffs, whatever that amount is, and so we'll have to just those are just things that, when you say what am I mean, maybe not keeping me up at night, but things I am definitely going to be, I'm watching here or those are the sort of the policy change. Again, the fundamentals of the freight economy, we're getting better, back to normal, not great, but back to sort of normal. And then we'll watch these things.
So let's talk about carrier attrition. What do you see in there?
You know, First of all, and you look at this stuff too. I mean, it is hard to get a precise reading on what is happening there.
Exactly.
Um, couple things. One is there is no doubt. Well, there's no doubt carriers and all have gone out of business. We know that, right? What exact extent, that's tough. I look at a lot of different things. I look at FMCSA data on authorizations. I look at revocations. I also look at employment in for hire trucking for production and non-supervisor workers. That's a proxy for drivers. We look at, what's going on with the equipment. Are they buying new equipment? Are they not getting, and that after we look at exports of used trucks and all of that. And if you take all of that in totality, um, no doubt supply has come down, right? We know that. The problem has been that so far, uh, demand has not picked up enough to bring that into balance.
Yep.
So now, could that happen at some point? Of course, we're watching the policy issues we just talked about, but yes, absolutely. And I think at some point here, we're going to wake up one day and go, holy smokes, it got tighter, right? Um, Now, with that said, in past cycles, I think you would have seen a lot more people go under in the same circumstances, right? And
Okay.
what's changed this time is a few things. Used truck market's been tough, right? So lenders don't necessarily want to take back equipment that they're upside down on as well. No, there's no about that. The other thing is, I've been, as we said I've been doing this a long time, longer than I like to admit, right?
Yep.
And remember, there was a time in this period where, um, if you were an independent contractor and you took a load to wherever, Atlanta, and you dropped off a load, and then way back, I'm going back years, right? And then what did you do? You started calling up brokers, right? You start calling, hey, I'm in Atlanta. You got anything for me? You got anything? And as you know now, you get out, one of these things here, and you can get it. And what's happened is, and that's great, right? Um, Cash flow is better than it used to be. And that helps sustain folks longer, even if they're losing money in the long run or on those individual loads.
Buys them more time.
It does. But eventually, it's either got to get really good again, which I don't see happening, or it's going to catch up. So, ironically, as things normalize, and that means getting a little bit better in the freight economy, a little bit better, I still think you are going to see some failures. And I think you're going to see some supply go away, even in the face of slightly better market conditions.
Yeah, I would agree with that 100%. What am I seeing? What am I watching? I'd say it's the toughest is in the rearview mirror,
Yeah.
but I don't know that the hangover is something that a lot of that everyone's going to make it through. To your point, it's difficult because without an uptick, we don't necessarily see an uptick in freight rates, and I think it'll be a slower. I think those that are expecting a COVID type turnaround, that's really unrealistic and far fetched. I think that is an anomaly and it's over,
Yeah.
and we've paid for that for 2 to 3 years now, and when there's an uptick, we're going to feel it because that's going to show us that the capacity is a little bit slight of what it really probably needs to be throughout the country, but we haven't been able to feel it because we haven't seen the uptick. So it's one of those where I think navigating it's going to be different. From a shipper's perspective, I think a lot of the shippers have tried to change their networks to be more resilient, but I think at the same time the clawback has been painful, and the repercussions from that might be felt more so in the next 12 months.
Continue watching on the next episode of the Stay in Your Lane podcast.